Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise, and we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. Hello dear viewer and listener, my name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Let me welcome you to another dynamic, invigorating episode of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. As always, we try to bring you life-changing and empowering information right at the cutting edge of business. And we have today a very great guest who's going to help us advance on that path. His name is Mr. Dominic Mogwe. Mogwe, welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Lerumo. Thank you.
To start off our conversation, can you just tell them who you are in terms of what you do and a little bit about your background?
Okay. Hello, viewers. Welcome to this podcast. My name is Dominic Mogwe. I have more than 35 years experience in the IT field.
Yes.
And IT, just like other fields like medicine and so on, has got specialties. My specialty is more on the strategy side, including risk management.
Just face error.
And what I'm going to talk to you about today is something called Enterprise Architecture.
Mm-hmm. What is the definition of that? But maybe before we do, just share your training, your academic training.
Okay. My academic training, I have a BA in economics from the late 70s, mm-hmm. and lots of countless number of IT courses. Mm. I'm an IT, that's my field. My field is in IT. Mm. I've been a programmer, I've been a systems analyst, I've been all those things, I've been an IT manager and so on. Mm. And what I went and specialized in as I advanced my career was more to do with how IT can actually improve our lives.
Okay, your degree is in IT, your master's is in IT?
No, my first degree was just economics, but specializing in statistics. Mm-hmm. And then my master's, which I got from the University of Pretoria, is Master's of Information Technology, MIT. Mm-hmm. Yes.
What exactly is, enterprise architecture?
Enterprise architecture is basically a framework or a set of frameworks and best practices that assists, not necessarily businesses, but organizations to improve on the way that they do things. Basically, it also helps in aligning the IT component of the organization with its organizational mandate.
Okay. And in terms of it even having a name, AE, is it something that every organization should have? Or is it something that is expected of any organization, or only large entities need to bother with that?
Not necessarily large entities, even small entities. I'll give you a good example, for example. Let's say you have a tour operator in the Okavango, and this tour operator, obviously, apart from accommodating tourists as a mandate for that organization, they also have a mandate of feeding the tourists. They've also got a mandate of getting the tourists to go to where the tours are taking place. Mm. So basically, enterprise architecture would look at how they best attract those tourists, to how they satisfy the tourists' catering needs. 3, how they take care of the tourists in terms of bedding and accommodation, and also the tour part of it. But all those are the mandate of one organization.
Okay.
So what enterprise architecture will do, will look at the best way of attaining all those objectives optimally.
Okay. Your company is called Pula Tours. Tell us about the motivation or the impetus behind it and when you formed it.
No, not Pula Tours. My company is called Radical ICT Solutions. I'll just give you an example about Pula Tours.
Oh, I got the impression that you're involved with them.
I'll just give you an example about how enterprise architecture
okay, all right.
into an organization.
Okay, what is your connection with Pula Tours? How did you come to learn about them?
Well, I'll just give you an example.
Yes.
I'll just give you an example that a company like Pula Tours would benefit from using enterprise architecture. Basically, I was answering your question where you were asking whether that enterprise architecture only is beneficial to big organizations or small organizations. It's beneficial to any organization, including government as well.
Oh, I see. Yes. Okay. All right. Now let's then. Thank you for that correction. Let's talk about your own company. What was the impetus behind it?
The impetus behind our company is that I was once involved in a very big project which looked at enterprise architecture for the Botswana government, all the 18 ministries. And that project taught me lots of things that I wasn't even aware about in terms of how government processes are managed and how best they can be managed in order to optimize not necessarily the returns on investment, but how citizenry or the people of Botswana could benefit from using enterprise architecture. Yes.
And then what does it do? I mean, remember we're talking to lay people here. We don't know much about this area, or the little we know is foggy.
Okay. Basically, what it does is, with the use of IT being, many organizations these days depend on IT to operate, whether it's a financial institution or a school and so on. More and more business processes have been automated. But then you find that the way people go about it is that someone will say that I'm going to automate this process without looking at how best to do that. So enterprise architecture actually helps you to how best to align your business strategies with IT. One good example is that you find that an organization would have an application that looks at finance alone, but not looking at the other mandates of that organization and how best that finance can integrate with other business processes within the organization. Okay. So enterprise architecture actually addresses all those issues.
All right. Let's get out. You gave an example in tourism with using Pula Tours.
Yes, okay.
Can you give an example in real estate so that we can understand, or any other area?
Any other area.
To understand really how it works.
Let me give you one example about public transport, for example. I think I'm more comfortable with that. Real estate, it's a bit it's a bit crazy, but with public transport, for example, I'll give you a good example. Right now, you get onto a bus and you go to Francistown. You get on the bus, you know it's leaving at 10, and it's arriving in Francistown around about 5 or 4. And you get on the bus, you're told that Hawaram to Francistown is 130 pula. You take out 200 pula, the bus has already started its journey, you take out 200 pula, and another passenger takes out 200 pula. So obviously, the best way to address that is to automate that process of ticketing. Now, apart from just processing, apart from automating that process of ticketing, you need to look at the bigger picture. One, you need to look at the risk of the conductor on that bus carrying lots of cash in order to be able to accommodate the people that are paying for their tickets in cash. That's one. Two, you find that some people, imagine the whole bus, everyone produces a 200 pula note. Where is the change going to come from? So obviously you look at automating that process. And when you automate that process, not only are you automating that process, you are also looking at having statistics of when there are more passengers on that particular bus. You basically have all that information once you've automated that process. Yes.
Okay. All right. Just want to revisit the question of EA itself.
Yes.
The history side. Go tell us even about Professor Dewey Walker, and help us understand how the whole thing came about.
Professor Dewey Walker, together with another gentleman called John Zuckman, worked for IBM. This was back in the 60s. And Zuckman was actually a student to Professor Walker. What he did, he went and improved the formats of what his mentor, Walker, was saying in terms of enterprise architecture. And then they came up with an enterprise architecture. He came up, John Zuckman came up with a framework that structured EA. And this was basically back in the 80s, when the computer systems were just taking hold of the workplace. Yes. And ever since then, enterprise architecture has grown. And as time went on, there were more and more frameworks that came into being. And one thing I need to mention is that as enterprise architecture developed, lots of frameworks for enterprise architecture actually came up, because not one size fits all, basically.
Is it really like software?
It's much more than that.
Yeah.
It's much more than that. It involves software. What software does, it automates, obviously, a particular process. But with enterprise architecture, what it does, it improves on that, how best you do that. For example, you find that in an organization you would have software which is built on silos, whereas one silo, let's say the stock silo, doesn't talk to the sales silo.
People are working in silos, yeah.
Yes. So enterprise architecture addresses that.
Okay. So there are methodologies involved.
There are
Can you tell us about those methodologies?
The methodologies that are there are basically which are frameworks. There are lots of them. But one that comes to mind is one from the open group called TOGAF. TOGAF, yes, TOGAF. TOGAF, that framework addresses a number of issues which address the enterprise architecture. But there are other frameworks as well, like there's TOGAF, there's another one called FEAF, which is the Federal Enterprise Architecture Framework, based on the federal government in the USA. There's another one from the Gartner group. Gartner is basically a research group. They also came up with a best practice for EAP, which they used in the general consulting practices. There are lots of
so when you
frameworks.
take something like Microsoft Windows and maybe you look at a few others, where do they fit into the architectural framework?
Well, let me start by saying that for an application to run, it will need to run on a system software. So Microsoft Windows is basically a stage on which applications will run, for example.
Okay, so it's just like a foundation.
Yes, it's like a foundation. Now, with enterprise architecture, depending on what you want to achieve, let me first of all say that enterprise architecture, basically, when you implement or do enterprise architecture, the first thing you do is you look at an organization and say that, what does this organization do? It's called an as-is analysis.
As-is analysis.
Yes. Then you say, okay, for this organization to be able to improve in terms of its mandate, what needs to be done? How does it get to that? So you have that as is stage, and you have the target stage, and then you come up with what needs to be done for you to move from as is to get to the target architecture. Basically, that's
okay.
Now we found that. Let me just say about something. We found that a particular framework, let's say for example TOGAF, depending on the organization, would address certain issues for that organization. So you probably need a bit of TOGAF, a bit of another framework, and a bit of another, in order to be able to satisfy the needs for that organization. And by so doing, like I said earlier on, one size doesn't fit all.
Okay.
For example, you find that some countries, like I know in South Korea, they've got their own, the government there has got its own framework, enterprise architecture framework. So there are lots, like I said.
Yeah, now that you mention a foreign government, what about our government? What is the framework or the methodology that we use?
It's a mixture of methodologies. For example, when you do enterprise architecture, you look at issues like the technology that you are using, the technology that you want to use. You look at the data that is available and what you need to do in order to get your target. You look at the business as well. What does, for example, what does this need to do? What's its mandate? How does it do it now? How do you see it improving on what it does to get to the target?
Yes.
And then when you do enterprise architecture, for example, you look at things like technology, the data, the applications, the business, and I mentioned the data, isn't it? And it's the data, the application, the technology, and the business. But you find that depending on the organization, you could also bring in the governance element in terms of enterprise architecture. Like anything else, the governance usually plays a very big role in what you are doing.
Yes. Now, what would you say are the biggest differences between the framework in government circles or in a public setting versus the framework used in private sector? What are the main distinctions?
The main distinction is that government caters for everything. It facilitates everything. Whereas a particular organization will focus on its main mandate. But then, government also works together with other organizations. For example, government would like to know, for example, how many people are in a particular place, like a survey, using a survey. Yes, I'm just giving an example. But if I that the organization, let's say the bank, for example, the bank deals with money. They borrow money, they finance projects, they keep money for their customers, and they facilitate transactions. You see, but then you find that even government as well uses some of those services that are
in a different context. Like for instance, the post office, for instance.
For example, yes.
Yeah. Now, what is the skill set that one needs to thrive in this area? What do you think the specialized training that one needs? Before
I even come to that, let me say that some people usually associate enterprise architecture with IT. That's correct, and it's wrong as well.
It's both wrong and right.
Precisely. You find that for enterprise architecture, you find that there's the business component of enterprise architecture. The best practice, usually you find that in an organization you have what is known as a CI, or Chief Information Officer. The enterprise architect in that organization would report to the chief information officer in terms of the structures of reporting. And coming to the skill set, normally it would be someone whose skills are IT, but with a business component as well. It's very, very important. It doesn't mean if you're a good programmer or a coder, you'd make a good enterprise architect. Yes. And not only that, there are tools. One thing that I need to...
Perhaps a double major, IT and business.
Or get IT and then you also do some courses in business as well.
Okay.
That helps you to understand those business processes in an organization. Yes.
If you were to come into an organization such as this one, Mogobe Incorporated,
yes, okay.
How long would it take you, A, to figure out whether or not we have enterprise architecture, and B, to tell what sort of improvements are needed?
For an organization like Mogobe and so on, the entire process of doing an as-is analysis and a target architecture and how to get there shouldn't take more than 2 months. Shouldn't take more than 2 months. I'm saying so from my experience, where all the team that were in, all the 18 ministries of the government of Botswana took us 3 years.
Yes.
And I'm talking about a team of about how many? About 30 people or so.
So you study the current systems,
yes,
and then establish what the objectives of the organization are, and then find an architecture to align to that helps align the systems with the objectives of the
organization. Yes, yes.
I think I'm beginning to understand it.
And in terms of, let's say for example, in terms of an organization that depends on making money, returns on investment, for example, a shop, you want to sell items, how best can you get your returns on investment? You also look at your market. So enterprise architecture would actually help that organization with that market component. How to optimize your market.
What would you say is business architecture and what is governance architecture? And what is the differences, main differences between the two? First define them and then tell us the distinctions.
The two architectures, let's say the business architecture, looks at the business component of the organization, whereas the governance architecture will look at how those processes are regulated, either internally or how the impact, how the law, the existing law, impacts on those activities. Yes.
And do you need both of them to work together? I mean,
you do.
Why?
You do because you don't want to do something that is illegal.
Yes.
You don't want to do something that is illegal.
Yeah.
Or
so it's really looking at the regulatory framework and the
both internal and external as well. Yes.
So you mentioned now it goes back to we're taking 2 months in a simple organization, taking 3 months in government.
3 years.
3 years in government, sorry. 3 versus 2 months. So what would you say are the essential components to help you to really get to the bottom of it and come up with a blueprint, as it were?
One of the key components is to share what you want to achieve and how you're going to achieve it. And the most important one is also to have a buy-in from your client. If you don't have the buy-in, then it flops. You need the buy-in. And now, one thing that I wanted to mention is that with initiatives like the fourth industrial revolution, 4IR, and so on and so on, and digitizing also these processes that we've been using for centuries, enterprise architecture plays a bigger role, a very big role with all those initiatives.
There are other aspects to this in terms of other components of architecture beyond governance and governance and business. What are the other ones? Other forms of architecture. For instance, there's information architecture, there's applications architecture.
Like I said earlier on, all these architectures, not one size fits all. You find that what you probably call information architecture, depending on the organization, you could actually break it down to data and application in an organization. So it depends on the particular organization that you are dealing with.
So these terminologies should not be taken too far, because there's also technology architecture.
Yes.
Yeah. So one should not take them too literally.
No.
Because they overlap.
They overlap. Yes. Okay. Yes. Technology would address things like what servers are using, what services are you using for automating your. Do you do it in-house or use the cloud technology where someone else does that for you and hosts your systems for you? So there are all those decisions that have to be made.
Lerumo, without mentioning any names, here's your chance to blow your horn a little bit and give us instances where your organization intervened and made a difference, and maybe share with us what it did, without necessarily mentioning names of the companies you assisted. But I think you should give us a case study and share with us.
Okay. Basically, from our experience is that normally, that organizations have what is known as external audit. And one question that comes up usually, or registration that comes from the external auditor, is that they ask the organization, where's your IT strategy? This is your business strategy. Where is your IT strategy? And from our experience is that a number of organizations have a problem with aligning the IT strategy with the business strategy. I think most of them do it subconsciously by saying that we are following what the auditor said, without realizing that it's something that gains, that the organization actually gains. That's my experience.
Yeah, but now, what did you do? What were your interventions? Give examples.
The interventions usually
where your company was involved.
Okay. Yes, we've gone in and done as this analysis, and depending on the organization as well, and find that if an organization hasn't even got an IT policy, they just buy servers and things like that and so on. We say, do you want us to do that for you, or you source that to someone else, or you can do it in-house? And then we get that IT policy, and through EA, align it to the corporate.
And you've done it successfully. And what was the outcome?
The outcome is that most of our clients actually became aware about certain things that they were doing without realizing what they were. Yes.
They had aha moments.
Yes. So this. Okay, that's why we did this. We do this. It's because of this and this and that and that. See.
Okay, but looking at the landscape in general, how far are we? To what extent are we becoming more conscious of this aspect of EA?
I would say a long way.
Are we still far?
We're still far, but we're getting there. In my opinion is that the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment, especially after COVID, has actually opened our eyes to newer opportunities. People think about, how do I digitize this, which they never thought about before COVID, which actually, I see that being an opportunity for people to accept and also have the benefits of enterprise architecture in organizations. Yes.
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation. But you brought up COVID. I might as well ask you how it has impacted you positively and negatively as a company, and you personally as a businessman.
Negatively, some of the jobs that we had in mind had to be cancelled or put on hold because all the resources were moved to COVID. But positively is that more and more people are now seeing the need to digitize,
So
which opens lots of opportunities.
has that impacted your bottom line?
It has started impacting the body. It has started to.
Okay, just talking of a startup, let's say a two-man company, maybe somebody who's interested in, for lack of a better example, let's say, involved in international trade, e-commerce, for instance.
For example,
Yeah, two-man organization just starting. What would you do for them? What would you put in place in terms of enterprise architecture for a small startup?
For a small startup, the first that I would look at where they are and where they see themselves being in the next 3 or 4 years. And then I would say, okay, fine, this is where you want to be, and so on. In order to get there in 4 years and so on, you need to do A, B, C, and D. And how to do that A, B, C, D? By doing A and that, and also explaining to them how all those initiatives talk to each other. Yes.
And then you would actually design something. You would come up
with a blueprint.
Blueprint for
Yes,
them.
come up with a blueprint.
All right. And does it matter? I mean, in terms of you work for both government and the private sector.
Okay.
So you have enough. The skill set that you have allows you to maneuver on both areas.
Yes.
And where would you say are the biggest challenges are? Having been active in both public sector and the private sector.
I think one of our biggest challenges is the appreciation of EA itself. That's why we're busy trying to preach to the business world that there's this architecture which needs to be done. At times in some organizations we find that the biggest challenge is getting the buy-in. The buy-in is one of the biggest challenges.
Well, that leads to my next point, which is the importance of having forward-thinking leaders.
Yes, okay.
In enterprise architecture.
Okay.
Where does one find them? Is there an example that you think of in terms of a country that has figured this out?
In terms of country, one that comes to mind is South Korea itself.
South Korea.
Estonia.
Estonia,
yes. In Africa, I think a number of countries are making headway in terms of that.
For instance,
Mauritius, Tunisia. But we'll get there.
I believe Rwanda, isn't it?
I'm not quite sure in terms of the rankings, but those ones that I mentioned, I know that they made.
What is it about them that puts them head and shoulders above everybody else? What puts them apart? Mauritius and Tunisia. Forward-thinking leaders?
I think it's also the support that they get from the leadership as well, in terms of setting up structures that actually support that. One place that is like that is South Korea, where they have actually governmental structures that actually support all those, and not only that. One thing that I forgot to mention earlier on is that when you come up with a suggested infrastructure enterprise architecture, You also have to look at the legal framework. In some countries, companies like ours come up with suggestions, and then they engage the people in the legal to draw what best legal framework to adopt in that particular country in order
to
support
draft
that.
the legislation,
for example, yes. For example, yes.
They would have
yes.
They would tell the draft persons what is needed, and they would design something.
Yes.
Yeah. Still on the question of human capital and the importance of EA, if you had the authority, and you could you had a magic wand that you could.
You just
yes,
okay.
What would be the key changes, or the key if you had to decree, what would be the thing that you would declare tomorrow in Botswana for us to get this done, or to get this started on the right track?
Hey, there would be lots of things in terms of structures and also mandates of those structures. Lots of areas that would be.
But mention a few keywords, please.
Now, with the new government structures like what's this new ministry, Ministry of Enterprise?
And entrepreneurship.
Entrepreneurship. Looking at, I haven't actually dwelt on what the main mandate is, but it's one area that needs to be looked at, what the main mandate is. And if they could drive some of those initiatives, I see us getting somewhere. Yes.
You don't want to be prescriptive?
No.
Okay, I understand. Okay, most commonly reported hard skills for IT enterprise include Java, JEETs, and so on and so forth. Talk about the hard skills. Someone like me might have a difficulty understanding Java and J2EE, for instance.
Those are, in a nutshell, those are software packages that the enterprise architect would use. Yes.
And they would need to master them in what way?
Not necessarily being a specialist, but at least appreciating them.
Cloud computing?
All those.
Some of us think that clouds are the source of rain. So explain how cloud computing comes into the picture.
Basically, what happens is the cloud. Let's say an organization, a small organization, for example. Why should they spend so many thousands to buy their own server, to have their own IT department, when those services can be outsourced?
But don't you have to pay for that?
You pay for that.
But comparatively little.
Compared to if you had to run them yourselves or employ people to do that for yourselves. Yes. And not only that, even in terms of capacity, you find that the cloud technology, you don't have to worry about the capacity. Whatever you have agreed with the service provider is provided to you, you see. So.
But is it easy to retrieve your information?
Very.
What if there's a dispute with the service provider?
The service level agreements that you sign will look at all those issues. Yes. Before you even actually get into that agreement. Yeah. Yes.
So in other words, there's no excuse for companies not to have this in place.
No. Most clear that the cloud computing now is broken into lots. There's Internet of Things, and so there are lots of frameworks in terms of the cloud computing, and globally, lots of organizations are using that. At first, obviously, people were worried about keeping the information where they don't know where it's kept and so on, the security part of it. But all that is taken care of.
How? The security aspect?
There are lots of technologies that are used in terms of securing
yes.
Wherever that information is kept.
Are you saying here and now to entrepreneurs who may be listening that you don't need servers at all?
Not necessarily.
What are you saying?
What I'm saying is that depending on your capacity, you can still enjoy those services without having to pump in a lot of money. Yes.
But ultimately you need a server?
Not
if the money is there? I need you to explain. When do you need a server? Assuming money is not an issue, do you need a server or you don't need a server?
The thing is, the way I look at it is not necessarily money, but you're also looking at when you outsource those services, it leaves you with room to concentrate on your main mandate. Yes.
Okay. The gentleman you mentioned, I think you said his name is Gartner.
Gartner is a group.
It's a group.
It's
okay.
It's a group. Yes.
I thought it's based on someone's name. Okay.
No,
Gartner.
I don't know, maybe, but it's a group. They do a lot of research in terms of in the IT area.
Okay. They've made certain recommendations about popular options currently on the market if one is setting up the architecture. Can you talk a little bit about them? Sort of what you need. For instance, they mentioned OBAS. I'll run through OBAS, Super X systems, Software AG, Evolution. Perhaps you can just run us through those, what they are.
Okay, let me just do that.
Enterprise architecture and tools and software.
The tools and software.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Like I said earlier on, some of the things that you use are things like the tools that you use when you do your enterprise architecture. Now, Gartner has recommended some popular ones. Now, you find that things like OBAS and Sparks and Software AG have actually been made by some software company in order to help you to do your enterprise architecture. Yes. One that comes to mind right now is SAP. SAP is a big software company. It's been there for a while. They've done things like some years back, I think in the 80s or something, they came up with a system that's used by big corporates, which put together the, let's say, for example, the sales and what your expenses are and so on under one roof, you see. So this theme of integration actually came, it's not a new thing that SAP has come up with. But I mean, all these business design and so on are tools that an enterprise architect can use in order to be an architect, enterprise architect. Yes, yes.
Do you think we need to find homegrown tools of our own, or there's a case of there's no need to reinvent the wheel?
I think there's no need to reinvent the wheel. We found that most of these tools are sort of generic. Generic. They would.
Generic.
Yes. They would.
It's a big word. What do you mean?
I mean, they would address most of the issues that you are looking at. Yes. So why do you have to reinvent the wheel?
Okay. So, as we come towards the end of our conversation, Lerumo, what would you say now, where we are in this century? How important is AE for the survival of enterprises? And what can you say to awaken entrepreneurs out there about the importance of EA, enterprise architecture?
The most important one that comes to mind is automating your business processes efficiently. Yes. While at the same time also taking care of the risks, governance issues, and also depending on the organization as well, return on investment. Yes. So I see that's the way that the world is going to. Yes.
So are you prepared to say that companies, it's a sink or swim moment for companies to accept this?
Yes, it is.
Companies which don't will sink. Can you say that with certainty? Or will struggle?
Without mentioning any names, I know of one organization that is implementing that in Botswana.
Implementing what?
Enterprise architecture.
Okay. Because they were facing extinction if they didn't.
Well, it was rolled out from the head office, wherever the head office is, and so on. And they said, because they had to be on top of.
No, what I'm asking you is it an existential threat or existential issue for companies to adopt enterprise architecture?
It is an issue for companies to do that because they'll be left behind if they don't do that.
Okay.
Yes.
It might lead to their demise.
Yes.
Okay. I want you to talk about.
Can I give you an example?
Yes.
Remember in the old days we used to take a photograph.
Yes.
And then have it
sent and then processed.
And then printed and so on. We no longer do those things.
No, we don't. No.
What happened to some of those companies that were
they collapsed?
They collapsed.
Well, it's not a secret that Kodak has collapsed.
Precisely.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example.
Even cell phone companies.
And Polaroid and others.
Yes.
So if you don't come on board, you risk.
Your risk is substantial.
Precisely. Yes.
Yeah. So, should it be mandated that every company should have an IT policy?
I think so, because more and more companies are automating the process somewhere. Some 20 years ago, you walk into a shop and say, I want to buy this, and then someone just pinches, and then but right now, people scan things.
All right. I want to talk particularly about your company in terms of what its current composition is and what its plans are for growth. In answering that, I want you to look at your plans for the future 10, 15 years down the line.
Basically, our company being a relatively new company, what we did is we grouped ourselves, and some of the resources that we have in the company are people who have had experience in the project that we once did at government. And we see ourselves, depending on what jobs we get, employing more people, especially young people. There are lots of people out there, lots of
programmers.
Not necessarily programmers, even database administrators and so on and so on. And when you bring them aboard on a project, you just put them through so that fine. Since you are a database administrator, your database administration, in this case, will focus on this, in this framework. And then we see ourselves creating jobs especially for the young people. Lots of them are employed.
Coders, programmers, database administrators.
Application developers as well. Yes. Because some of the initiatives from here will talk about an application. But that application find that it's something that can be done within Botswana. You don't have to go and buy a package from somewhere else. You see? So we have all those resources that can actually do that. But basically, I see lots of opportunities. Like I said earlier on, many companies these days actually are being coerced into having an IT policy. Now, does that IT policy address the business, IT strategy? Does it address the business strategy? Yes or no? So that's where EA comes in.
Yeah. You see? Do you think organizations like Botswana Innovation Hub are helping in this area, or are they doing enough in terms of assisting government in this area?
I wouldn't like to comment on that at the moment, but I think it is something in a good direction. It is an issue that's in that direction. A couple of years back, we never thought about an innovation hub. You see, which is something which. Because
I'm sure they grapple with some of these issues.
They do.
You haven't interacted with them?
The time I tried to interact with them, they put up something on the portal where you need to upload what you can do and so on. I've been struggling to get it to work. I've never got it to work.
Maybe someone is watching from BIH, the Botswana Innovation Hub. They've changed their name a little bit.
Yes, they put in an extra word.
Yeah, I forgot what that is.
Yes,
It's
okay,
Botswana Innovation and Technology Hub. I'm not
Something
sure.
like that. They put in an extra word. Yes.
So maybe one of them is watching this and will say, Mr. Mogwe, you're trying to reach us. Here we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would actually welcome that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Towards the end of this show, you're allowed to ask me a question. So think about what question to ask me. But before you do, what about you personally, Lerumo, in this IT space? Where do you see yourself as an IT consultant and specialist in this area in the next 5-10 years?
I see myself being a mentor of lots of young people. And then looking back and say that's where I came from. I mean, even in my IT career, I still look back and say that, when I'm at the airport, I said, the system was rolling it out in all the airports in Botswana.
So you still pride yourself?
Yes.
You set up, you help the airline, what is CAAB?
No. Air Botswana, when I was working for Air Botswana, before I got there, they used to, you come on the ticket, you check in, and then tell out your flight, given a boarding pass and so on. That system, I don't know whether it's still the one being used now.
No, you just show your number. You just mention, you show your passport, your ID.
You see?
And they pick it up.
But before that, the first step was actually to automate the entire process, even when they're still using that. The entire process of checking in.
Yes.
That I rolled out, I was part of a team that rolled it out to all the 4 airports in Botswana. Gaborone, Francistown, Kasane, and Maun.
Oh, I see. Yes.
So each time I'm at the airport, I say, here we are. But I see, coming back to your question, I see myself, God willing, in those years, looking back and say that, this is where we came from and look what we have now.
Any other highlights that you are proud of as being part of a team in creating?
The other one that I highlight, that I pride myself with is when I worked for DBS Prospecting. I was part of a team that automated the lab process for the samples. Yes.
What does it do now?
Instead of, initially it was highly manual. So when the DBS exploration group decided to automate that, I was part of a team that when people from Canada, Brazil, Australia, and so on, put in some classroom in Joburg, then taken to Kimberley for a month to go and study that process, and then send back to our home countries to go and implement that. So that was part of the things that I did.
Wow, it's very exciting. Well done. You can ask me your questions.
Mogobe. First of all, I would like to thank you for according me this opportunity of this interaction. Now, yes, as a matter of interest, what does this actually do? This session, what does it do?
Well, the main objective is to promote entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship.
Okay.
To cultivate that culture.
Okay.
We use the words infuse, energize, inspire, and empower.
Okay.
We're hoping that by someone listening to you, a guru, somebody who's established in the industry, somebody like you, they'll be inspired to pursue their dream if they're interested in IT.
Okay.
They'll be inspired to get in touch with you. They'll be inspired to dig deeper and to see that someone can make a living from this. So the idea is to motivate entrepreneurs and to heighten that culture.
Okay.
So as far as I'm aware, this is the only entrepreneurship podcast on YouTube that is local.
Okay.
So we have something of our own. We have things internationally and perhaps even in South Africa. But what motivated me was to have a local product, a local brand that speaks to entrepreneurship. So what you've shared with us will hopefully be seen by hundreds, even thousands. I have, for instance, an interview that was done by Lerumo of Choppies. It's over close to 8,000 views. There's one done by other people, 7,000, 3,000. So a lot of people are interested in this content.
Okay.
So that is the hope.
I'll say it's a very good initiative, actually. It is. And more and more people these days, excuse me, more and more people these days, you and me know that on social media and people, so many people will visit the pages and I think nearly everyone uses that. Like the other day I was looking for a particular service from someone, and I got it from the social media.
Indeed, indeed. All right, look at that camera, Ramogo. As we conclude our conversation, I want you to leave the viewer with something uplifting, something inspirational and motivational, a take home, as it were. That is the camera.
Okay. After this session that we had, Lerumo, I would appreciate it if everyone who is looking at this can actually take on board what I was talking about. It will help your enterprise to advance if you adopt to these frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ramogo. It remains for me to thank you and to request that you share all your contact details, even on social media, with the viewers so they know where they can reach you.
Okay. You can reach me on WhatsApp, 76066531. And my email is dominic.mogwe@gmxg for golf, M for Mike, X for X-ray.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've been a great guest.